I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, board-certified cardiologist and apparently the family ATM. The funeral home smelled like lilies and regret. My grandmother, the only person in my family who ever believed in me, lay in a polished mahogany casket while 40 relatives whispered about her estate. I'd paid for the entire funeral. The casket, the flowers, the catering afterward. $12,000 that my parents never even acknowledged. I stood near the back in my black dress, the one I'd worn to medical conferences, trying to process my grief. Grandma had been my champion through medical school, through my residency, through every family gathering where my younger sister Emma got praised for her potential, while I got reminded to stay humble. Emma stood next to our parents in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked perfect as always. Blonde highlights fresh from the salon I'd paid for last month. Designer dress I'd bought her for Christmas. She hadn't worked in 3 years, claiming she was finding herself. That finding had cost me roughly $98,000. The service ended. People filed into the reception hall. That's when my father cleared his throat and tapped his wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, if I could have your attention." His voice boomed across the room. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward him. We wanted to share some wonderful news during this difficult time. My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. That was his, "Sarah's going to be generous" tone. As you all know, Sarah has been very blessed in her career. He smiled at me. It didn't reach his eyes. She's built quite a successful medical practice. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Several relatives nodded at me. I felt my spine straighten. And Emma, well, she's been struggling to find her footing. He put his arm around my sister. She looked down demurely. "So we've decided as a family that Sarah will be transferring her medical practice to Emma. Give her sister a real opportunity." The room erupted in applause. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to tilt. "This is what family does," Mom added, her voice thick with manufactured emotion. "Sarah understands that Emma needs this chance. It's what Grandma would have wanted." I felt every eye on me. Expectant. Approving. Waiting for me to nod and smile and play my role as the family savior. Instead, I heard my own voice, clear and cold. "Absolutely not." The applause died like someone had cut a wire. Dad's smile froze. "What did you say?" I said no. I set down my untouched wine glass. "I'm not giving Emma my medical practice. Sarah." Mom's voice turned sharp. "Don't be selfish. Not here. Not now." Selfish. I almost laughed. I paid for this entire funeral. I've paid for Emma's rent for 3 years. Her car. Her credit cards. I've given you both $40,000 for emergencies that never get paid back. That's what family does. Dad's face reddened. "You make good money, Sarah. Emma needs help getting started." Getting started at what? She's 29 years old and has never held a job for more than 6 months. Emma's tears started. Right on cue. "How can you be so cruel? We raised you better than this," Dad hissed. He looked around at the watching relatives performing for them. "Your grandmother is barely cold and you're being ungrateful. Selfish. After everything we've done for you." My hands trembled. Not from fear. From rage I'd swallowed for 15 years. "What exactly have you done for me?" The question came out quieter than I expected. "You didn't pay for my college. I had scholarships and loans. You didn't help with medical school. I worked 3 jobs. You didn't come to my graduation because Emma had a recital that same weekend. We've supported you emotionally," Mom said, but her voice wavered. "You told me I'd never make it as a doctor. You said I should be a nurse instead because it was more realistic for someone like me." Uncle James shifted uncomfortably near the hors d'oeuvres table. Aunt Carol studied her shoes. "You're embarrassing yourself," Dad said through clenched teeth. "Emma deserves this opportunity." "To do what?" "She doesn't have a medical degree. She can't run a cardiology practice. She can learn." Emma sobbed. "You're just jealous that Mom and Dad actually love me." That old familiar knife, sliding between my ribs. I looked around the room. 40 faces. Relatives who'd watched this dynamic play out for decades. Who'd seen Emma get the car, the college fund, the endless second chances. Who'd seen me work myself to exhaustion while being told I should be grateful to help. And suddenly I was done performing. I walked across the room. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor. Everyone watched in silence. Dr. Patricia Chin sat in the back row. Hospital administrator. Board member. My boss, technically, though our relationship was more collaborative. She'd come to pay respects to my grandmother, who'd volunteered at the hospital for 20 years. Dr. Chin, I said clearly. Could you please explain to my family the structure of my medical practice? She looked surprised, then understanding crossed her face. She stood, smoothing her black suit. Of course, Dr. Mitchell. Her voice carried authority. Sarah is not just a physician at County General. She's a senior partner in our cardiology department. She owns a 30% stake in the practice, which she purchased after completing her fellowship. Dad's face went from red to purple. The practice has 6 cardiologists, Dr. Chin continued, pulling out her phone. Sarah brought in $2.3 million in revenue last year. She can't simply transfer the practice. She has a legally binding partnership agreement. She turned her phone around, showing a PDF of the contract. The terms were clearly visible. Any change in partnership requires unanimous board approval, a 6-month transition period, and the incoming partner must be a board-certified cardiologist with a minimum of 3 years' experience. Dr. Chin looked at Emma. Do you have those qualifications? Emma's mouth opened and closed. Furthermore, Dr. Chin continued, her tone professional but pointed, Sarah is being considered for department head this year. Her research on pediatric cardiac interventions has been published in 3 major journals. She's not just a doctor. She's one of the top cardiologists in the state. Mom's wine glass slipped. White wine splashed across her black dress, but she didn't seem to notice. We didn't know, Mom whispered. You never asked, I said simply. Uncle James spoke up from across the room. Sarah, I had no idea you were doing so well. Because they never told you. I gestured to my parents. Every family gathering they introduce me as our daughter who works at the hospital. Never as Dr. Mitchell. Never mentioning my research or my patients or my achievements. We didn't want you to get a big head, Dad muttered. Or maybe you couldn't stand that I succeeded without you. The words tasted like freedom. That I became exactly what you said I'd never be. Aunt Carol stepped forward, her expression troubled. Margaret, Robert, did you really expect Sarah to just give her practice away? Emma needs help, Mom said weakly. Then help her get qualified, Dr. Chin said crisply. Medical school takes 4 years, residency another 3 to 4. If Emma wants to be a cardiologist, there's a path. But she can't simply inherit someone else's career. This is ridiculous, Dad snapped. Sarah, we're leaving. You can apologize when you've come to your senses. I'm not apologizing. My voice didn't shake. And I'm done. Done with what? Done paying your mortgage. Done covering Emma's credit cards. Done being your backup plan while you treat me like an embarrassment. Mom gasped. We never. Last month, you introduced me to your book club friends as your daughter who works in healthcare. Emma, who doesn't work at all, was pursuing her dreams with family support. Emma's tears had dried. Now she just looked angry. You've always been jealous of me. Jealous. I almost laughed. Emma, I've paid your rent for 36 months. That's $43,000. I paid off your car loan, $18,000. Your credit card debt that you swore was a one-time emergency, $22,000. Should I continue? The room had gone completely silent. You kept track. Emma's voice rose. You actually kept track? My accountant did. For tax purposes. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app. I've given our parents $41,000 in the last 4 years for emergencies. Your salon appointments go on my card. $6,000 annually. Your shopping, your trips, your lifestyle. All subsidized by the daughter they're ashamed to brag about. We are not ashamed, Mom said, but her voice broke. Then why did you tell your friends I was a nurse? Silence. Why did you skip my medical school graduation? More silence. Why, at every single family event, do you find ways to diminish what I've accomplished while praising Emma for simply existing? Dad's jaw worked. You've always been independent. You didn't need us. I was independent because you gave me no choice. The grief hit me then, fresh and sharp. Grandma was the only one who came to my white coat ceremony. The only one who asked about my patients. the only one who looked proud when I walked into a room. My voice cracked. Dr. Chin put a steady hand on my shoulder. She left you money, Mom said suddenly. In her will. She left you $100,000. And you assumed I'd give it to Emma. The truth sat between us like broken glass. This ends today, I said. I'm not giving Emma my practice. I'm not giving her grandma's inheritance. And I'm not giving either of you another dollar. You'd abandon your family? Dad's voice shook with rage. You abandoned me first. You just kept me around to fund Emma's life. Emma lunged forward. You selfish bitch. That's enough. Dr. Chen's voice cracked like a whip. This is a funeral, for God's sake. Have some respect. Several relatives nodded. Uncle James moved to stand beside me. Then Aunt Carol. Then Cousin Michelle, who I'd helped through nursing school. The room had divided. And my parents' side was notably smaller. If you walk away from this family, Dad said, his voice cold, don't come crawling back. I won't need to. I looked at him clearly. I have my career. My colleagues. My patients. My self-respect. What do you have when the money runs out? Mom's face crumpled. Sarah, please. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. I'm done being your secret success and your public disappointment. I turned to Dr. Chin. Thank you for coming today. Grandma always spoke highly of you. She was proud of you, Dr. Chin said softly. She showed me photos of your published research. She bragged about you constantly at the hospital volunteer meetings. Of course she did. Because Grandma had actually loved me. I walked toward the door. Uncle James followed. So did Aunt Carol, Cousin Michelle, and half a dozen other relatives who'd watched my parents' favoritism for years. Behind me, Emma's voice rang out. Fine. Leave. We don't need you. I paused at the door, looking back one last time. My parents stood together, arms around Emma. A perfect family portrait, minus the daughter who paid for the frame. You're right, I said quietly. You don't need me. You need my money. There's a difference. I walked out into the autumn air. It smelled like rain and new beginnings. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chin. Board meeting Tuesday. Bring your research proposal. Department head position is yours if you want it. I typed back, I want it. Behind me, the funeral home doors closed. Ahead of me, the rest of my life waited. Free from the weight of people who loved what I could provide but never who I was. I got into my car and drove away from my family. For the first time in 34 years, I didn't look back.